So the I think there is an English version. I'm not sure, but it's in actually a simplified Hebrew. And our goal here today is to do the introduction, the Art Scrolls. We're going to take a short portion of the Art Scrolls introduction, which really um, provides us with an understanding of the difference, or at least the beginning of an understanding between the difference between the Bavli and the Yerushalmi. Okay. So that's what we're going to do today. Um, I'm trying. Just give me a second. So to let you know what the page is, in this beautiful new art scroll, Yerushalmi's.
I like the color. Cool color.
Yeah.
You bought it yesterday? Yeah. St. Patrick's? Oh,
There you go. It's on page Chaf Dalid of the Art Scroll Hebrew Yerushalmi. So here you have it. For those who are in TV land, I'm going to share the screen. I'm not sure that I'll have to make copies of the daf, and just to be able to share it on the screen. But if we succeed in this endeavor, I would encourage anyone who's online to pick up a copy of the Yerushalmi Berachos. It's in 2 volumes,
I
and
have
it's
an English one.
you have an English one. That's great.
I borrowed one, yeah.
Oh, fantastic. Okay, HaTalmud HaYerushalmi. It's being recorded. HaTalmud HaYerushalmi ke'achiv habavli. The Talmud Yerushalmi, like its brother, the Babylonian Talmud, who echad me amudei hatavech alehem omedet haTorah sheba'al peh. It is one of the middle pillars upon which all of Torah sheba'al peh stands. Ikarohu mitorat Amorae Eretz Yisrael. The primary sort of text of the Talmud Yerushalmi is authored by those Amoraim who were living in Eretz Yisrael during the time of this composition period. Chamisha dorot shel Amoraim. There were 5 generations of Amoraim. Be'erech, bein hashanim gimel taf taf kuf samich, until Dalid kuf yud. What years are those? That's literally 3,960 until 4,110. So approximately from the year in the secular calendar, from the year 200 to the year 350 of the Common Era, this is when this text has been composed. Lamdu v'limdu Torah be'eretz Yisrael. So the rabbis studied and taught Torah in Eretz Yisrael, bi'ikar bigalil, primarily in the Galilee. Today you go up to the Galil, you figure what's up there. There's not much up there. But that was the center of Torah study after the Churban, after the temple was destroyed. B'tzfona shel haaretz, in the northern part of Israel. Hadumut haboletet bahem hi dumuto shel Rabbi Yochanan. So the primary feature of the Talmud Yerushalmi is the verbiage of Rabbi Yochanan, Migedolei ha'amoraim shaharbe mitorato mishukat kam b'Talmud Bavli, whose Torah is really ubiquitous in this text, and whose imprint is found in the Talmud Bavli as well. Toratam nikneta lahem b'tza'ar u'v'dochak, and this is an important point. One of the reasons that we're going to see why Talmud Yerushalmi finds its voice in the way that it does, in a very terse and sometimes maculated way, and also why it's not as studied as prevalently or as much throughout the ages as the Talmud Bavli, is because the Torah of the Yerushalmi was acquired through pain and suffering. Heim chayu la'achar churban habayit, tachat hakivush ha'achzari shel haromaim. The Jews who composed this text lived after the destruction of the temple under the cruel Roman domination. B'tekufa shel praot u'redifot u'shmadot, at a time of great persecution, of pursuits, of destructive decrees upon them. Bigvura ikeshet uv'mesirus nefesh l'lo shiur lo harfu me'amal haTorah. But with great dedication and sacrifice, they did not desist from their Torah study. It's not like, why should it have an influence? We'll see. We'll see. Shehi chayinu va'orech aminu, because the Torah is our life and the length of our days. Lebasov hecherivu yidei Esav b'sinas oilam es heichalo hayeshivot be'eretz Yisrael v'nadam ba kol haTorah. He says, eventually, the evil enemy of Esav, which is Rome, with their tremendous hatred, destroyed all of the yeshivas and eliminated the sound of Torah study completely in Eretz Yisrael for a period of time. Ulam Torat Chachameha Kayemes Lanetzach B'toch HaTorah Sheba'al Peh HaMesura Lanu. But the voices of those great rabbis endures for all time in this text of the Yerushalmi, Ubifrat b'Talmud HaYerushalmi Talmud Shel Eretz Yisrael, especially in the text of Talmud Yerushalmi. Gam la'achar shenadam kol haTorah be'Eretz Yisrael, even after, or v'nidam, I think maybe is the right way to read it, even after the sound of Torah study was eliminated in the land of Israel, himshichu amoroi Bavel lahagot b'Torah v'la'amol ba. The sages of Bavel continued the project of Torah study. In other words, Torah study was never completely extinguished. It was thriving in both Bavel and in Eretz Yisrael. In Eretz Yisrael under greater hardship, but when that voice of Torah was silenced in Eretz Yisrael, it continued to thrive in Bavel. Ad chatimat haTalmud haBavli, until the completion of the Talmud Bavli, Kemeya v'chamishim shana la'achar achiv haYerushalmi, approximately 150 years after the completion of the Talmud Bavli. So what you're seeing is that the Talmud Bavli has the opportunity to flourish and mature and evolve and to become more robust when the Talmud Yerushalmi project has been silenced. So now, the Talmud Yerushalmi finishes around the year 350 of the Common Era. The Talmud Bavli finishes around the year 500 of the Common Era.
Did the sages of Israel go to Babylon?
Some of them, the ones that were able to, fled to Babylon. That's why you find Rabbi Yochanan being quoted.
Did they not go back and forth still a lot?
Yeah, there was still travel back and forth. You do also find stories of Amoraim who went to Eretz Yisrael or who came from Bavel from Eretz Yisrael to Bavel and vice versa. So apparently, from the stories that we have in the Bavli, there still was traffic going back and forth, but it wasn't easy. You couldn't easily live as a scholar in Eretz Yisrael. B'tekufa zu sidru v'archu es Talmud Bavli, shenasa hachulya hamerkazit b'shalshelet hazahav shel mesiras haTorah l'doros. So during that period of about the 150 years between the finishing of the Yerushalmi and the finishing of the Bavli, that's when they were able to organize the Bavli, and it became the central pulia, which is the central vertebrae or the spine in this golden chain of transmission. Talmud HaYerushalmi b'muvan misuyam shaka shimsho batzaharayim. And therefore, the way that some scholars or poets describe the completion of the Talmud Yerushalmi is that its sun set in midday, which means that there's a sense of incompleteness to the text of the Yerushalmi. B'terem huva lidei gemar maspik, it didn't have a chance to fully get finished by people who would refine the text. Ekev hagezerot v'hashmadot shenerach b'tzilan, as a result of all of the evil decrees that were made upon the scholarly community in Eretz Yisrael. Okay, and so he writes, "Talmud Bavli nasa lenachalas haklal, l'Torah shekol Yehudi mikatnuto v'ad yimei hazikna amal ba v'hofech ba v'hofech ba." So the Talmud Bavli has therefore become the general inheritance of Am Yisrael. It's the Torah that every Jew, from the young until the old, can toil in and turn it over and turn it over again. Ba'od Talmud Yerushalmi notar kesefer chatum, whereas the Talmud Yerushalmi throughout the generations was left like a closed book. Ve'ein oskim bo ela talmidei chachamim muflagim u'miyuchadim. The only people who really studied the Yerushalmi throughout the ages were very, very scarce Talmidei Chachamim. Harishonim v'achronim ha'meforsamim gedolei aposkim u'meforshei Talmud Bavli, and therefore all of the Rishonim and the Achronim, the famous ones like Rashi and Ritva and Rashba and Ramban and so many others, Meviim amnam b'chibureim ketayim rabim in ha'Yerushalmi v'danim b'hem. They will sometimes bring paragraphs from the Yerushalmi and deliberate over them. Ulam Talmud Yerushalmi notar azuv, but it was largely neglected. Uma'atim hema talmidei hachachamim shehogim bo b'kivias. And there are very few talmidei chachamim throughout the generations who have studied Yerushalmi regularly. Chaser lanu efo limudo shel chelek gadol v'chashuv min haTorah shebal peh. And therefore, understandably, there is a big chunk of Torah Sheba'al Peh that has been missing for generations. Toratam shel Amoraim Kedoshei Elyon, the Torah of the holy Amoraim of Eretz Yisrael. V'harei anu ka'adam she'echad me'evarav miduldal ve'en yachol lihishtamesh bo. It's as if we're like the body politic of of the Jewish people is like a person who has a limb, but it's handicapped and he can't use it. Nachutz efo biur chadash banui al yesodot ne'emanim shel hameforshim hakadmonim, and therefore it was necessary to attain a new commentary that is built upon trustworthy pillars of prior generations. Sheyiftach lichlal Yisrael es sha'arav hanu'ulim shel chelek chashuv zemin haTorah sheba'al peh, with which we could use. Now, what the author of this text is essentially saying is that when you look through the classic print of the Yerushalmi, you don't find standard commentaries. There's no Rashi. There's no Tosfos. These are commentaries that come later. They come in the, let's say, the starting with the period of the early Achronim. There are no Rishonim on Talmud Yerushalmi. Nothing. You'll find sometimes the Rambam knew the Yerushalmi, other Rishonim knew the Yerushalmi, but they make scarce reference to it. Sometimes the Rambam will paskin like the Yerushalmi over the Bavli, and we'll hopefully be able to see some examples of that. But
politics like between the two when they're both going on the same time.
Okay. So here's the thing. This is a really good question, Moise. I'm going to take a little bit of an interlude. There's no discussion of politics here. The discussion is, this is the standard understanding of why the Yerushalmi sort of was not studied and was not embraced throughout the generations. But through my studies over the years, I've also attained some of the scholarly materials as to why the Yerushalmi was not studied as much. And so I asked ChatGPT to just put it into a concise summary. So I'm just gonna read this for you. And if anyone wants this, maybe I'll post this document on the WhatsApp today. Below is a brief survey of how modern historians of rabbinic literature usually explain the dominance of the Babylonian Talmud. So number one, the traditional explanation, which is what we just read, interrupted redaction in Roman Palestine. The classic explanation found in medieval Jewish, and by the way, the traditional term in English for the Talmud Yerushalmi is the Palestinian Talmud. Don't read anything into that. That's what it was called in the early 20th century, when anything coming from Eretz Yisrael was called Palestinian, right? So anyway, the classic explanation found in medieval Jewish sources and repeated in popular literature is that the Jerusalem Palestinian Talmud was never fully edited because the rabbinic academies in Roman Palestine collapsed under persecution in the 4th century. Modern scholarship generally agrees that the Yerushalmi is more fragmentary and less polished, which likely reflects an incomplete redaction process. However, scholars usually treat this as a textual explanation, why it looks unfinished, rather than the full explanation for why the Bavli became authoritative. Number two, the decisive factor, the rise of Babylonian Jewish leadership. Many historians emphasize institutional and geopolitical reasons rather than purely textual ones. After the Islamic conquests of the 7th century, the Babylonian academies, especially Sura and Pumbedisa, became the central institutions of world Jewry. Their heads, the Gaonim, issued responses to Jewish communities across the diaspora and thereby spread the authority of the Babylonian Talmud. In other words, Jewish population centers shifted towards Babylonia and the diaspora. The Gaonic academies controlled the main intellectual networks. Their legal rulings were based on the Babylonian Talmud. Thus, the Bavli became the operative legal corpus of the Jewish world. So to answer your question, Moish, was there politics involved? It seems like from the scholarship, yes, part of it had to do with the failed project of the Yerushalmi that was interrupted because of religious persecution. But because of that religious persecution, there was a whole migration, and the centers of Torah study focused in Bavel. And so proud Babylonians published like the art scroll of their time, which like art scrolls from America. It's not from Eretz Yisrael. So that became the more dominant study because that was where the seat of political.
So at what time did Babel take over? Because Eretz Yisrael was the center, the calendar had to be set, even though it changed by
Yes. So it's slowly shifting over centuries.
For centuries.
Yeah. So I mean, look, the Talmud Bavli finishes at the beginning of the 6th century. The Gaonim are in the 7th century. Okay.
The Shulchan Aruch, does it source the Yerushalmi, or only does the
Sorry, again?
The Shulchan Aruch, when they want to read halachas from do they use this?
So the Shulchan Aruch will sometimes paskin like the Yerushalmi if it's cited by the Rambam, or one of the other Rishonim, because the Shulchan Aruch is dependent upon the Rishonim that come before the Shulchan Aruch. But it's not that common. I mean, I shouldn't say that. It's not that common for the author of the Shulchan Aruch to cite directly from the Yerushalmi. Many times the Yerushalmi is brought to the attention of the codifiers of Shulchan Aruch through the Rishonim. I shouldn't say that that's exclusively true, but I think it may be true. In any event, the Bavli's later and more sophisticated editorial layer, modern literary scholarship, highlights internal textual development. The Babylonian Talmud contains a complex anonymous editorial layer, often called the Stama'itic layer or Stam HaTalmud, meaning that when you read the Talmud Bavli, you're reading a narrative text that is not authored. It doesn't say so-and-so said. It's just like, Tashma, come and listen. And one answer is this, V'ibayis Ema, or if you want, I'll give you another answer. There's a textual flow within the Talmud Bavli that is more sophisticated than the textual flow of the Talmud Yerushalmi, which organizes earlier traditions into elaborate dialectical arguments. By contrast, the Yerushalmi tends to present shorter discussions, fewer editorial transitions, less developed dialectical structures. This makes the Bavli appear more systematic and intellectually satisfying, which may have contributed to its prestige and pedagogical dominance. Number 4, demographic and cultural shifts in Jewish life. Another widely accepted factor is the decline of the Palestinian Jewish community. After late antiquity, the Jewish population of the land of Israel diminished. So this is also brought by the art scroll. The Babylonian diaspora became numerically and economically dominant. Intellectual life gravitated towards Babylonia. As a result, the Bavli was simply the Talmud studied by the communities that survived and flourished. Number 5, retrospective halachic justification. Some scholars argue that later halachic principles, e.g., the law follows the Babylonian Talmud, are post facto rationalizations. The historical sequence likely looked like this. Babylonian academies became dominant institutions. Their text, the Bavli, became the basis of teaching and legal decision. Later jurists then articulated formal rules explaining why the Bavli should prevail. So the halachic principle reflects historical authority rather than creating it, okay? Which can happen throughout the ages. In other words, we have this principle, kol da'olim gavar, whoever is stronger dominates. And this has historical ramifications as well. The academies that dominated were the ones that carried the day as far as how we study Torah. So for example, in the Brisker method of Torah study, has a lot of prominence in today's yeshiva world because of the success of the Brisker, the families that the Soloveitchik families that came from Brisk. It's plain and simple, right? So that's just a small modern example. So
Exclusively modern day Iraq,
that's correct.
not
Yeah.
Iran, Iraq.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. Well, that was where, Baghdad is the capital, and that's, Jews are in Sura and Pumbedisa, which I'm not sure where they are in relation. I'm not an expert on the geography of Iraq today, but we'd have to look at an ancient map and superimpose it onto a modern map. So summary.
You see a map and it shows you where Sura was, where Pumbedisa.
Okay. So summary of the current scholarly consensus. So the next time you go to Iraq, you can visit. Yeah, right. So yeah, just don't, you want to avoid the restaurant in Fallujah, okay? Summary of the current scholarly consensus. Most modern scholars would say the Bavli's dominance resulted from a convergence of factors. Later and more sophisticated redaction of the Bavli, institutional authority of the Gaonic academies, demographic shift of world Jewry towards Babylonia, better preservation and transmission of the Bavli, and only secondarily Roman persecution affecting the Yerushalmi. Thus, the persecution explanation is not wrong, but it is insufficient by itself. Okay, so getting back to the art scroll Hakdama, let's go. Okay. Nachutz efo biur chadash. So therefore, so he's explaining why we needed a more modern explanation, especially because especially in our generation, shemeot alfei Yisrael chayim be'eretz Yisrael, where you have hundreds of thousands of Jews, now millions of Jews, living in Eretz Yisrael. Uzukukim midei yom biyomo lahora halacha lamaisa b'chol hamitzvot hatluyot ba'aretz. And people need practical halachic guidance as far as how to live in Eretz Yisrael. It's not a coincidence that there's no Bavli Gemara on Seder Zraim. The only Bavli Gemara that we have on Seder Zraim is Masechet Brachot. What about Demai, Meiser Sheni, Kilayim, Shavias? There's no Talmud Bavli on those Masechtos. Why? Because they were living in Bavel. These halachos were not pertinent. Okay? A Talmud ha-Yerushalmi, a Talmud ha-Yechidi al Seder Zraim, ha-Osek b'mitzvot elu. And you can only find these agricultural laws that have to do with Eretz Yisrael in the Talmud Yerushalmi. The limud Seder Zraim ha-Yerushalmi chiyunihu lelimud hilchotein, and therefore is essential for living in Eretz Yisrael. You need to know the halachos that are informed by the Talmud Yerushalmi.
But we do learn those halachas.
Some of them are contained in the Bavli. We have the Mishnayos, right? So the Mishnayos themselves are informative, but it's not the whole story. It's not the whole story. So you really need the Bavli for certain for our generation of Jews.
But you also don't have stuff in the Yerushalmi too, other samples that weren't.
There's no Kudshim in Yerushalmi. That happens to be true. Could that, what is that a product of? that's probably a product of the stifling of the project, which had things not been squelched in the middle of the project, they would have gotten eventually to Kachim. So therefore, la'achar hitiya'atzut im gedoylei haTorah shel doreinu be'eretz Yisrael ve'Amerika, natalnu al atzmeinu mif'al zeh bi'or chadash l'talmud ha'Yerushalmi. And so therefore, after careful consultation with the Gedolim in both Eretz Yisrael and in America, we hereby present a new commentary to the Talmud Yerushalmi. Talmidei Chachamim Muflagim Shoktim V'Amelim Hayitzirat Anak Zu, and a whole cadre of great scholars have spent immeasurable time on this project. Ad asher yatzu la'or be'ezras Hashem kol masechtos hayerushalmi echas le'echas, so that we are now able to present one by one a slow, a sort of unleashing of the Talmud Yerushalmi, one maseches at a time, kishehein mevu'aros la'omkan b'safa hashava l'chol nefesh, in a very readily understandable language. V'shuv kasher higdilu la'asos b'shanim hachronos. So, okay, then he explains who the Schottenstein family have been so instrumental in bringing this to the fore.
The language because it's in Hebrew, or language because we understand it better?
The language is in a more readily understandable Hebrew, according to this new commentary. The language of the Yerushalmi text itself is very terse and often contains difficult words because it's a combination of Hebrew and Aramaic. But at the same time, as he's going to say in this paragraph, the language of the Yerushalmi's Aramaic is different from the Aramaic of the Babylonian Talmud. They're just like there are different dialects of Arabic, there are different dialects of Aramaic. There was a Palestinian Aramaic and there was a Babylonian Aramaic. Okay, slightly different dialects. Okay, HaTalmud HaYerushalmi Doresh Amal V'Yigiyah Laredet La'omek Kavanato K'mo Re'ehu Abavu. It requires a lot of in-depth study in order to fully grasp and comprehend what the Yerushalmi is saying. Just like the Bavli. Ula mikama b'chinot hadrishot min halomet HaYerushalmi hein af kevedot yoter me'asher el hanidrashot min halomet HaBavli. But there are certain even greater difficulties in studying the Yerushalmi because of the language issue than there is in the Bavli. Lashon HaYerushalmi ketzara v'tamtzitit. He says the language of the Yerushalmi is very terse and very tamtzitit. In other words, it's very derivative. Lishna kalila, it's a light language. Yoter mizu shel Bavli, more than the Bavli. The Bavli is more expansive in its language. Ba'od shehabavli marichu marchiv b'vir ha'inyan, b'Yerushalmi advarim kitzarim ubilti musbarim kolkach. Whereas you will find expansive language in the Bavli, you will find very terse language in the Yerushalmi. Hashakla v'tarya b'sugyos ha'Yerushalmi kitzar b'derech klal harbe yoter me'asher b'Bavli. The back and forth dialogue is much shorter in the Yerushalmi than in the Bavli. Davar hamekashe al halomed lahavin et yesod ha'inyan machloket. And this sometimes makes it more difficult for the student of the Yerushalmi to fully grasp what the basis of the machlokes or the back and forth is. And that's why the commentary is so important. Pa'amim rabos chaseros afilu milot kishur. Sometimes you can't even find the connective words. Conjunctive words are missing sometimes in the Yerushalmi. Ve'ein halomid yodeya im kushi lefanav oteretz, to the point where it's hard to even understand, am I reading a question or am I reading an answer? Raya ostir, was this a proof or was this a disproof of the previous statement? Kifi shetsuyan le'el. And that's why sometimes the commentaries themselves will differ on the Yerushalmi. What exactly is the Gemara saying? Avodas ha'aricha hasofit shel Yerushalmi nikta'a be'emtza'a v'lo hayta yicholu liot mushlemet umugmeret k'mozu shel haTalmud Bavli. And the reason is because it was a project that was interrupted in the middle. Gam halashon ha'aramit shel Eretz Yisrael hashonem min ha'aramit ha'bavlit makshe al halomed. He says the fact that the Aramaic dialect in the Yerushalmi is different from that of the Bavli also makes it more difficult. She'eino ragil ba, because it's not the normative language that we're used to. V'chein makshim alav hamunachim hamyuchadim liyerushalmi she'ein ragil bahem. And the entire structure, the logical flow of the text is very foreign. It's not the same as the Bavli. נוסף לקשיים הנזכרים, הגרסה הנכונה של קטעים רבים בירושלמי אינה ידועה לנו. A lot of the correct text is not known to us, and we don't have the Rishonim to fill in the blanks for us. We don't have Rabbeinu Hananel, the Rif, Rashi, Tosfos, etc., on the Yerushalmi to be able to supplement what's missing. Okay, and we're going to have to hold it here for today. This is just a brief introduction, and we're going to start the Mishnah Be'ezrat Hashem tomorrow. I hope this was a good way to get started. I'm sorry if you were expecting to jump into the text, but I felt, yeah, this is just the background, and we'll get started Be'ezrat Hashem tomorrow. Have a great day, everybody.
That's serious about learning.